What the hell do you think you are doing? Kang Min-ho roared. Seo-yoon stood frozen over the massive mahogany desk, her fingers still clutching the silver drafting pen. Kang Min-ho threw on a black robe as she stormed towards. I was fixing the load-bearing axis, Chairman, Seo-yoon stammered. She bowed her head so low. The weight distribution was a disaster. It was going to collapse. What has she gotten herself into? She was supposed to deliver a file and leave, but she was drawn to the model. Min-ho stood in front of her, and she suddenly forgot how to breathe. But his eyes went to the model. The curve he had spent 3 agonizing nights trying to solve had been perfected by a delivery girl in 5 minutes. "Who are you?" he demanded. He didn't wait for an answer. He reached out and snatched her wrist, his grip like a vice. Seo-yoon flinched. His fingers clamped directly over the thin, silver surgical scar on her forearm. Her breath hitched. "Don't look at it. Please, don't recognize it." "Director Han Yura sent me," she lied, her pulse thudding against his palm. "Liar," Min-ho hissed. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. A flash of memory suddenly hit him. Rain, the smell of gasoline, a girl's voice whispering, "Don't close your eyes, please." "Your eyes," Min-ho muttered, his obsession flickering. "Why are you hiding your face?" Before she could answer, the office doors swung open. Han Yura marched in, her heels clicking like gunfire. She stopped dead, seeing Seo-yoon. "You! How dare you!" Yura screamed, pointing a manicured finger. "Chairman, I am so sorry. This delivery girl must have lost her way. She's mentally unstable." Seo-yoon felt the familiar sting of humiliation. Yura was the woman who had stolen her graduation designs and claimed she saved Min-ho's life. "I should speak up," Seo-yoon thought. "I should tell him I'm the one who pulled him from the burning car. I should tell him Yura was miles away that night." But then she remembered the hospital bill she received this morning. Her brother needed a second surgery. If she crossed Yura, the blacklist would become a death sentence. "I'm sorry," Seo-yoon whispered, pulling her arm away. "It won't happen again." She ran. She didn't look back at the confused, lingering gaze of Kang Min-ho. Seo-yoon stood outside the glass window of the ICU. Her younger brother, Min-seok, looked so small under the white sheets. "The deposit is 50 million won, Miss Lee," the administrator said, heartlessly checking a tablet. "If it's not paid by Friday, we move him to the general ward. You know he won't survive the infection there." 50 million. She might as well ask for the moon. Her phone buzzed, a restricted number. "Hello? Meet me at the Shindong Hotel, room 901. Now." It was Min-ho. Seo-yoon arrived at the Shindong Hotel soaking wet from the sudden Seoul downpour. She looked like a drowned rat in her oversized hoodie. The door to 901 was ajar. Min-ho was sitting on a leather sofa, a bottle of whiskey on the table. He looked exhausted. "Sit," he commanded. She sat on the very edge of a chair. "Chairman, if this is about the bridge model, I can explain." "I don't care about the bridge," he interrupted. He tossed a document onto the table. "I checked the surveillance. You fixed that model in 90 seconds. My best engineers couldn't do it in 9 days. Who are you, really?" "I am a ghost," she thought. "I am the girl whose life you accidentally ruined." "I'm just a secretary's assistant," she said. Min-ho laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "A secretary's assistant with the hands of a god. Fine. Keep your secrets. I have a proposition. My grandmother is dying of a heart condition. She refuses surgery unless I marry Han Yura. But I know Yura is a snake. I need a shield." Seo-yoon's heart hammered against her ribs. "A shield?" "A contract marriage. 3 months," Min-ho said, leaning forward. He grabbed her hand, the injured one, and looked her in the eye. "You look pathetic enough that my grandmother will pity you. but you're smart enough to handle the vipers in my family. I'll pay you 500 million won. Up front. 500 million. It was her brother's life. It was a house. It was freedom. Why me? She whispered. Min-ho's grip tightened. Because when I touched you in the office, I didn't feel like vomiting. That's a first in 5 years. He didn't realize he was holding the very hand that had dragged him through broken glass. There's a condition, Seo-yoon said, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp edge. Min-ho arched an eyebrow. You're in a position to negotiate? I work in the office as your personal secretary, not just a puppet wife. I want access to the architectural archives. Min-ho studied her. She's not after the money alone. She's after the files. What is she looking for? Deal, he said. But know this, if you fall in love with me, or if you try to leak a single secret to the press, I will personally ensure you never find work in this country again. Do we have a contract? Seo-yoon looked at the pen. She thought of Yura's smug face. She thought of her brother's failing heart. We have a contract, she said, signing her name, but she didn't sign Lee Seo-yoon. She signed the name she'd been using to hide. Kim Da-hye. The next morning, the Shindong HQ was in an uproar. The Cold King Min-ho arrived at the office not with Han Yura, but with a plain-faced girl in a cheap, high-collared gray suit. From today, Min-ho announced to the stunned executive board, Kim Da-hye is my chief secretary and my fiancé. Yura, standing at the back, dropped her coffee. The plastic cup shattered, splashing hot liquid onto her expensive shoes. Her face contorted into a mask of pure rage. That cockroach from the elevator? I'll peel the skin off her face before the week is over, she thought to herself. Min-ho leaned into Seo-yoon's ear, his breath warm against her skin. Start acting, honey. The sharks are circling. Seo-yoon forced a smile, though her knees were shaking. Don't worry, darling. I've been living a lie for 5 years. This is the easy part. As they walked toward the private office, a group of workers were moving a large glass trophy. One of them tripped. The heavy glass structure tilted, falling straight toward Seo-yoon's head. Watch out! Someone screamed. Min-ho reacted instantly, pulling her into his chest. The glass shattered against the floor, inches from them. In the chaos, Min-ho's hand brushed against her back. He felt it through the thin fabric of her suit, a thick raised ridge of scar tissue. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing. What is that on your back? Seo-yoon's face went pale. The first cliffhanger had arrived. It's nothing, she snapped, pushing him away. Just a childhood accident. An accident doesn't leave a mark like a surgical incision, Min-ho muttered. He watched her walk away, his suspicion growing. She's hiding something, and I won't stop until I strip every secret away. Yura didn't wait. By lunchtime, she had summoned Seo-yoon to the archive basement. The chairman wants the 2019 project files organized, Yura said, smirking. She pointed to a mountain of heavy, dust-covered boxes. By hand, no elevators. The sensors are down. Carry them to the 10th floor, all 50 of them. Seo-yoon looked at her thin, scarred arm. Carrying these would likely snap the pins in her bone. The chairman didn't authorize this, Seo-yoon said. I'm the creative director, Yura hissed, stepping closer. And I know you're a fraud. I don't know how you tricked him into that ring, but I'll make sure you break before the wedding. Now, pick up the boxes. Or should I call the hospital and tell them your brother's charity has been canceled? Seo-yoon's blood ran cold. She knows about Min-seok. She reached for the first box. The weight sent a lightning bolt of pain through her shoulder. She bit her lip until it bled, refusing to scream. 1 box, 2 boxes. By the 5th trip up the stairs, Seo-yoon's vision was blurring. Her arm was trembling so violently the box was rattling. On the stairs of the 7th floor, her legs gave out. She tumbled backward. This is it, she thought. I'm going to die on these stairs. Suddenly, a pair of strong arms caught her. The scent of sandalwood filled her lungs. What do you think you're doing? Min-ho was standing there, his face thunderous. He looked at the heavy box, then at her sweat-soaked face. Director Han said, I don't give a damn what she said, Min-ho roared. He looked at her trembling arm. He reached out and grabbed her sleeve, yanking it up before she could stop him. The bandage was soaked in blood. Who did this to you? He whispered, his voice dangerously low. Min-ho's fingers were like iron as he held Seo-yoon's arm. The expensive fabric of her suit sleeve was pushed up, exposing the white bandage now blooming with a red stain. The sight of it sent a jolt of unexplained electricity through his chest, a mixture of irritation and a protective instinct he didn't want to name. Who did this? He repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating bass. Seo-yoon pulled her arm back, her face ghost white. I tripped, Chairman. I'm clumsy. It's not a big deal. If I tell him Yura forced me to do this, he'll think I'm weak. Or worse, he'll think I'm trying to use him to settle a score. I can't lose this 500 million won. You tripped? Min-ho took a step closer, forcing her against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. You tripped, and 5 boxes of archive files moved themselves from the basement to the 7th floor? Do you think I'm an idiot? He looked at the stairs, then at the elevator doors across the hall, which were taped off with a maintenance sign. He knew exactly whose work this was. He turned his head and saw Han Yura standing at the top of the landing, her face a mask of faux concern. Oh, Min-ho, there you are, Yura chirped, descending the stairs with elegant grace. I was just telling Dahye that she needs to be more careful. I asked her to organize the files, but I had no idea she'd try to carry them all at once. She's so eager to please. Min-ho looked at Yura, then back at Seo-yoon, who was trembling. Yura, Min-ho said quietly, did you tell her to use the stairs? The elevator is broken, Min-ho. It's a safety hazard, Yura replied, tilting her head innocently. Min-ho pulled his phone out and dialed a number. Facilities? Why is the archive elevator out of service? I see. Repair it in 5 minutes or you're all fired. He hung up and looked at Yura. The elevator wasn't broken. The sensor was manually jammed from the outside. Yura's smile didn't flicker, but her eyes hardened. How strange. Some disgruntled employee, perhaps? Min-ho didn't answer her. He turned to Seo-yoon. Leave the boxes. You're coming with me. But the work. That's an order, Secretary Kim. 30 minutes later, in the CEO's suite, Min-ho sat Seo-yoon down on the velvet chair in his private office. He didn't call a nurse. He grabbed a first aid kit from his desk drawer and actually knelt, in front of her. Seo-yoon tried to pull her hand away. Chairman, this is inappropriate. I can do it. Sit still, he snapped, though his hands were surprisingly gentle as he began to unwind the blood-soaked gauze. As the last layer of bandage fell away, Min-ho froze. He wasn't looking at a fresh cut. He was looking at a deep, jagged scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. A scar that could only come from a high-impact trauma, followed by multiple reconstructive surgeries. This didn't happen on the stairs, Min-ho whispered. He traced the edge of the scar with his thumb. Seo-yoon felt a shiver run down her spine. The touch was too intimate, too familiar. For a second, she was back in the rain, feeling his pulse beneath her fingers as she dragged him from the wreckage. This scar, it's old. Why does looking at it make my own chest ache? Why does this girl feel like a ghost I've been chasing for years? I told you, Seo-yoon said, her voice cracking. A childhood accident. Stop lying to me! Min-ho stood up abruptly, his temper flaring. Every time I ask you a question, you give me a script. You're my fiancé. If you have a physical disability that prevents you from working, I need to know. I am not disabled. Seo-yoon stood up, her eyes flashing with a pride that didn't belong to a clumsy secretary. I can do the work of 10 people. My arm works just fine. I don't like people looking at it. Min-ho stared at her. The way she stood, the way she held her chin, it was the same regal defiance he had seen in the girl who fixed his bridge model. Fine, he said, clearing his throat. We have a gala tonight, the Shindong anniversary. My grandmother will be there. She's sharp. If she sees you flinch when I touch you, the contract is over. No money, no hospital bills. Understood? Understood. The Shindong anniversary gala. The grand ballroom of the Shindong Hotel was a sea of gold leaf, crystal chandeliers, and the elite of Seoul. Seo-yoon felt like an imposter. She was wearing a midnight blue silk gown that cost more than her brother's entire education. It had long sleeves, hidden by delicate lace, concealing her scar. Her hair was swept up, exposing her elegant neck. "Close your mouth," Min-ho whispered, offering his arm. "You look like you're waiting for a bus, not a billionaire." "I've never worn something this heavy," she whispered back. "I feel like I'm wearing a suit of armor." "It is armor," Min-ho said, his voice turning somber. "In this room, everyone is an enemy." As they entered, the music seemed to stop. The whispers began immediately. "Is that the girl? The one from the rumors? A nobody from the secretarial pool?" Min-ho must be losing his mind. At the center of the room sat Chairman Kang's grandmother, Madam Park. She was a tiny woman with silver hair and eyes that could see through steel. Beside her stood Yura, looking like a queen in a blood-red dress. "Grandmother," Min-ho said, bowing, "this is Kim Da-hye, my fiancé." Madam Park didn't speak. She beckoned Seo-yoon closer. Seo-yoon stepped forward and bowed deeply. "A secretary?" Madam Park's voice was thin but powerful. "My grandson says you have a special talent." "What is it?" Seo-yoon felt Yura's smug gaze. She knew what Yura wanted, for her to stumble, to act like a commoner. "I have a talent for seeing things that are broken, madam," Seo-yoon said, her voice steady, "and the patience to fix them." Madam Park's eyes twinkled. "Is that so? Then tell me, what is broken in this room?" Seo-yoon looked around. Her architect's eye caught a flicker on the ceiling. "The third chandelier from the left, madam. The mounting bracket is loose. It's vibrating at a frequency that suggests a structural failure. It will fall within the hour." The room went silent. Yura laughed. "Oh, Da-hye, don't be dramatic. You're trying too hard to be genius." Min-ho looked up. He didn't see anything, but he remembered the bridge model. He signaled his head of security. "Check it, now." 10 minutes later, the security guard returned, his face pale. "The chairman is right. The bolt had snapped. We've cleared the area. It was minutes away from a disaster." The whispers changed instantly. "She saved the gala? Who is this girl?" Madam Park smiled for the first time. "It seems my grandson has finally found someone with eyes that actually work." Yura's face turned a shade of purple that matched her wine. She leaned in toward her assistant. "Plan B. Now. I want her humiliated before the main course." Dinner was served. Seo-yoon was seated next to Min-ho, her heart finally slowing down. But then, a waiter tripped behind her. A tureen of hot seafood bisque tipped over. Seo-yoon felt the heat coming. Instinctively, she shielded Min-ho, twisting her body so the soup splashed across her back and arm. "Ah," she gasped, the heat searing through the lace. "Seo-yoon!" Min-ho stood up, grabbing a napkin. I'm fine, she insisted. But the pain was intense. "You're soaked," Yura said, stepping forward with a malicious glint in her eyes. Let me help you change. There's a spare dress in the VIP lounge. Oh, look at your sleeve. It's ruined. Let's just take it off. Yura reached out and, with a violent tug, ripped the delicate lace sleeve of Seo-yoon's gown. The room gasped. The scar was exposed. But it wasn't just the scar. Taped to her arm was a small high-tech device, a hearing aid transmitter that Seo-yoon used to monitor the audio from her brother's hospital room. What is this? Yura shrieked. A wire? Are you spying on the chairman? Yura. Min-ho, she's a corporate spy. The security team moved in. Min-ho looked at the device, then at Seo-yoon's terrified face. Explain, Min-ho commanded, his voice cold. If I tell him it's for my brother, Yura will find the hospital. If I don't, I go to jail. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the entrance of the ballroom. She's not a spy, she's a thief! A man walked in. It was Chairman Jung, Min-ho's biggest rival. He held up a portfolio. This girl, Kim Da-hye, stole these architectural designs from my firm 5 years ago. Her real name is Lee Seo-yoon. She's a blacklisted criminal. The bomb had dropped. Min-ho turned to Seo-yoon, his eyes filled with a terrifying, silent fury. He grabbed her by the shoulders. Is it true? Is your name Lee Seo-yoon? Seo-yoon looked at Chairman Jung, then at the man she was starting to trust. Yes, she whispered. Min-ho let go of her as if she were made of poison. The contract is void. Get out. Min-ho, listen. I said get out. The silence in the ballroom was more deafening than the accusations. Min-ho's hand stayed frozen in midair, the space between him and Seo-yoon widening like a canyon. Get out, Min-ho repeated, his voice no longer roaring but deathly quiet. That was worse. Before I have you arrested for fraud. Seo-yoon didn't beg. She didn't cry. She looked at Chairman Jung, the man who had stolen her future, and then at Han Yura, who was wearing a look of such pure triumph it was nauseating. I should tell him the design Jung is holding is the one I drew in the hospital bed after the accident. But he won't believe a criminal. I've already lost. She turned and walked out of the gala, the long train of the midnight blue gown trailing behind her like a tattered flag. She didn't stop until she was on the sidewalk, the cold Seoul rain instantly drenching the expensive silk. 48 hours later, Seo-yoon was back in the delivery uniform. Her brother had been moved to the general ward. The monitors beeped rhythmically, a ticking clock on his life. I need the money, Min-seok. I'll find a way, she whispered, clutching his pale hand. Suddenly, the ward door swung open. 2 burly men in suits entered, followed by Han Yura. She looked out of place in the sterile, crowded room, her designer heels clicking on the linoleum. So, this is the brother, Yura sneered, looking at the boy. He's expensive, isn't he? It's a shame his sister is a thief. No one will hire you now, Seo-yoon. I've made sure of it. Seo-yoon stood up, her eyes burning. What do you want, Yura? I want the bridge model, Yura hissed, dropping the act. The one you fixed. Min-ho is obsessed with it. He's realized the calculations are too perfect for a secretary. He's starting to dig into the old files from 5 years ago. I want you to sign a confession stating that you stole those calculations from me back then too. I will never do that. Then watch him die, Yura said, pointing at the oxygen monitor. I'll have the hospital administration evict him tonight. Yura turned to leave, but as she did, she accidentally knocked Seo-yoon's bag off the chair. A small hand-carved wooden bridge fell out. It was simple, weathered, and had the initials H carved into the base. Yura paused, but didn't recognize it. She kicked it under a bed and swept out. Min-ho hadn't slept in 2 days. He sat in his darkened office, staring at the 3D bridge model Seo-yoon had fixed. The lines were too familiar. He pulled out a crumpled, yellowed sketch, the only thing he had left from the night of the accident. The girl who saved him had sketched a map on the back of a medical form to show the paramedics where he was. The handwriting was identical to the notes Seo-yoon had left on his desk. "Chairman," his head of security, Captain Kim, entered. "We finished the background check on Lee Seo-yoon. The misconduct that got her expelled, it was a plagiarism charge filed by Han Yu-ra. But the dates are strange. The original files were created on a laptop that was destroyed in a car fire, on the same night you were attacked." Min-ho's heart skipped a beat. "What did you say?" "And there's more. I checked the medical records for that night. A girl was admitted to a clinic 3 miles from your crash site with a crushed right arm. She refused surgery to save money and checked out against medical advice 2 hours later." Min-ho stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "Where is she now?" "She's at the hospital. Her brother is being evicted." At the hospital, the nurses were already disconnecting Min-seok's monitors. Seo-yoon was on her knees, pleading with the floor manager. "Please, just one more day, I'll get the money." "Rules are rules, Miss Lee. The Shindong Foundation withdrew your sponsorship." Just as they moved to wheel the bed out, the elevator doors at the end of the hall flew open. Kang Min-ho marched down the hallway, his coat billowing behind him. He looked like a storm cloud. "Stop!" he roared. The nurses froze. Seo-yoon looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Are you here to watch the end, Chairman? Is this part of the voided contract?" Min-ho didn't look at the nurses. He went straight to Seo-yoon, grabbed her by the waist, and pulled her up from the floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" he growled, his voice breaking. "Tell you what? That I'm a thief? That I'm a fraud?" Seo-yoon pushed him back. "You didn't want the truth, Min-ho. You wanted a shield. You wanted a puppet." Min-ho reached into his pocket and pulled out the old yellowed sketch. "This is my life. I've carried this for 5 years. I looked for the girl who drew this every single day. I thought it was Yura because she had the medal I lost that night." "She stole that too," Seo-yoon whispered. "While I was calling the ambulance, she was taking your jewelry." Min-ho's face went through a terrifying transformation, from shock to agonizing guilt. He looked at her scarred arm. He finally understood. Every time he had been mean to her, every time he had called her pathetic or clumsy, he had been stabbing the person who gave him a second chance. "I'm sorry," he whispered. It was a word that had never crossed his lips in 30 years. "Sorry doesn't pay for his surgery," Seo-yoon said, her voice cold. "I've already bought the hospital," Min-ho said, turning to the floor manager. "This floor is now restricted. Bring the best surgeons in the country. If that boy doesn't wake up, I'll tear this building down." He turned back to Seo-yoon, but she stepped away. "The contract is over, Chairman. You found your savior. You don't need a fake fiancé anymore." "You're right," Min-ho said, stepping into her space, his eyes burning with an obsessive intensity. "I don't want a fake fiancé. I want a real wife, and I'm not letting you disappear again." "Captain Kim." "Yes, sir?" "Find Han Yura and Chairman Jung. Tell them the Ice King is awake, and I'm hungry for a hunt." The next morning, Han Yura arrived at the Shindong boardroom, expecting to be announced as the new head of design. Instead, she found the room empty, except for one person. Seo-yoon was sitting in the chairman's chair. She was wearing a crisp white power suit, her scarred arm resting openly on the table. "You're in my seat," Yura hissed. "Actually," Min-ho's voice came from the intercom. "She's in her seat. As of 10 minutes ago, Lee Seo-yoon is the majority shareholder of the Shindong Architecture subsidiary. And you, Yura, you're under investigation for identity theft and attempted murder." The doors locked. The atmosphere in the Shindong boardroom was suffocating. Han Yura stood paralyzed as security guards flanked the exits. The very walls she thought protected her were now a cage. "Attempted murder is a heavy word, Min-ho," Yura said. her voice trembling but her eyes still spitting venom. You think this little secretary's scars are enough to put me away? Where's your proof? Seo-yoon stood up slowly. She didn't look at the guards. She looked at the wooden bridge model Min-ho had recovered from the hospital. The proof isn't in the scars, Yura. It's in the design. She tapped a command on the tablet in front of her, and a wireframe of the new Seoul Bridge projected onto the wall. This project uses a specific proprietary algorithm for wind load resistance, an algorithm I wrote when I was 20, an algorithm you couldn't explain if your life depended on it. Min-ho stepped out from the shadows behind the chair, his hand resting naturally on Seo-yoon's shoulder. The touch was no longer part of a contract. It was a declaration of war. Captain Kim, Min-ho said, take Director Han to the basement holding room. We'll wait for the prosecutors there, and call Chairman Jung. Tell him I'm hosting a private auction for the bridge rights. He'll come running. Chairman Jung arrived at the Shindong Private Club an hour later, smug and smelling of expensive cigars. He expected to find a defeated Min-ho ready to beg for the bridge designs back. Instead, he found a dinner table set for 3. Jung, Min-ho said, gesturing to a seat. You remember my fiancée, Lee Seo-yoon? Or do you prefer to call her the ghost whose career you buried? Jung laughed, sitting down heavily. A talented girl. It's a pity she has a criminal record. No one cares who drew the lines, Min-ho. They care who owns the patent, and I own it. Actually, Seo-yoon said, her voice calm as she sipped her tea, you own a patent based on a 2019 file, but that file has a poison pill embedded in the code. I knew back then that Yura was stealing my work. I designed the bridge to fail its safety audit after exactly 5 years of simulated stress. Young's cigar dropped. You're bluffing. Check the news, Min-ho said, sliding his phone across the table. The headline was breaking. Jung Group's landmark bridge project suspended. Structural flaws detected. You ruined your own masterpiece just to catch me? Jung roared, lunging across the table. Min-ho moved faster. He grabbed Young's tie and slammed his head into the table with a sickening thud. You didn't just steal a bridge, Jung. You stole 5 years of her life. You made her live in the shadows while her brother died in a general ward. Min-ho's face was inches from Young's. I don't care about the bridge. I'll burn the whole company down if it means you end up in a gutter. After the police had carted Jung away, the penthouse was silent. Seo-yoon stood on the balcony, looking out at the Han River. The wind pulled at her hair. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to hide her arm. Min-ho walked out, holding 2 glasses of wine. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside her. Why did you go that far? Seo-yoon asked. You lost billions today by sabotaging that bridge. I told you, Min-ho said, looking at her profile. I have a talent for seeing things that are broken. I was broken, Seo-yoon. That night, 5 years ago, I didn't just lose my blood. I lost my trust in people. When Yura claimed she saved me, I hated her for it. I hated that I owed my life to someone so hollow. He turned to face her, his gaze intense. But when I found out it was you, it felt like the world finally made sense. I didn't save you today to balance the debt. I did it because I can't breathe if you're not in the room. Seo-yoon felt a lump in her throat. Min-ho, I'm not the angel you remember. I'm tired, I'm cynical, and I have a brother to take care of. Then let me be tired with you, he whispered. He reached out, his fingers tracing the scar on her arm. This time, she didn't pull away. He leaned in, his lips inches from hers. But then his phone buzzed. It was a video call from the hospital. Chairman, Miss Lee, the head doctor shouted, his face filled with shock. Min-seok, he's awake, but he's asking for someone named the Master. He says there's a second person who was there that night. Seo-yoon and Min-ho exchanged a look of pure confusion. A second person? Seo-yoon whispered. At midnight in the hospital, Min-seok was sitting up, pale but conscious. When he saw Min-ho, he didn't look grateful. He looked terrified. Nuna, Min-seok grabbed Seo-yoon's hand. Don't trust him. Min-seok, it's okay. Min-ho saved us. He's the one I pulled from the car. Seo-yoon soothed. No, the boy shook his head violently. The car crash, it wasn't an accident. I saw the man who cut the brakes. He was wearing the same ring as him. He pointed at Min-ho's family crest ring, the one worn only by the heirs of the Shindong group. The room went ice cold. Min-ho stepped back, his face turning ashen. Min-seok, I was the one in the car. Why would I cut my own brakes? Not you, Min-seok whispered. The other one. The one who looks exactly like you. Seo-yoon looked at Min-ho. She had never heard of him having a brother, but she saw the way Min-ho's hands started to shake. Min-US widened. It's impossible. My twin brother died in the fire 15 years ago. My parents buried him unless the grave is empty, he thought to himself. Suddenly, the lights in the hospital floor flickered and died. A voice came over the intercom, a voice that was an exact, haunting duplicate of Min-ho's. Hello, brother? Did you miss me, or were you too busy playing house with my savior? A red dot appeared on Min-ho's chest. A sniper was positioned in the building across the street. Get down! Min-ho tackled Seo-yoon to the floor just as a bullet shattered the glass. The shattered glass of the hospital window rained down like diamonds, embedding itself into the linoleum floor. Min-ho kept his body pressed hard against Seo-yoon's, his heart thundering against her back. The red dot of the sniper's laser danced across the pillow, where Min-ho's head had been seconds before. Don't move, Min-ho breathed into her ear. The angle? He's in the north wing of the construction site. Min-ho, she whispered, her voice trembling as she looked at her brother, who was curled into a ball on the hospital bed, shaking. The intercom. He called you brother. You told me you were an only child. Min-ho's jaw tightened so hard a muscle pulsed in his cheek. I was. My twin, Min-seok, named after your brother, was declared dead in the fire that killed our parents 15 years ago. I saw the body. I stood at the grave. He looked at the laser dot now burning a hole into the wall. But death is the easiest lie to tell in a family like mine. The intercom crackled again, the sound distorted by a sickening, playful static. 10 seconds, Min-ho. Either you walk out into the hallway alone, or the next bullet goes through the boy's heart. Choose your life or the savior's blood. No! Seo-yoon grabbed Min-ho's lapel. It's a trap. He'll kill you both. Min-ho looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the Ice King vanished. He looked like the boy she had pulled from the wreckage, vulnerable and terrified of being alone. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. 5 years ago, you saved me because you were brave. Today, I'm saving you because I'm selfish. I can't live in a world where you're just a memory again. He stood up, his hands raised. Min-ho, stop! He didn't listen. He stepped into the line of fire, his silhouette framed by the jagged glass of the window. But the shot didn't come. Instead, the red dot vanished. A heavy silence fell over the hospital wing. Then, the heavy double doors at the end of the hallway groaned open. A man walked in. He was wearing an identical bespoke charcoal suit. He moved with the same predatory grace as Min-ho, but his eyes, while the same shape and color, were vacant, devoid of the humanity Min-ho had fought so hard to regain. This was Kang Sun-ho. 15 years, Sun-ho said, tilting his head, and you still smell like our father's cologne. Pathetic. Min-ho stood his ground, shielding the door to the room. Why now, Sun-ho? Why wait until I found her? Sun-ho laughed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Because she was the only thing you had left to lose. I let you build the empire. I let you think you were the Ice King. But a king is nothing without his crown, and your crown is this girl? Geese. Sun-ho looked past Min-ho, his gaze landing on Seo-yoon. Lee Seo-yoon, the girl with the genius hands. You think you saved a man that night? You only saved a shadow. I was the one who pushed the car off the cliff. And you ruined a perfect execution. Seo-yoon stepped out from behind the door, her fear replaced by a cold architectural clarity. The car didn't just fall, the brakes were cut with a precision tool. I saw the marks on the line when I crawled under the chassis. It wasn't just a murder attempt, it was a design. Sun-ho's eyes lit up with a twisted admiration. See, brother? She's wasted on you. She sees the how. You only feel the why. What do you want? Min-ho demanded, his fists clenched. Everything, Sun-ho replied. The Shindong group, the bridge, and the girl. If you sign over the remaining shares tonight, I let you live. You can go be a nobody, a delivery boy, just like she was. Min-ho didn't sign. Instead, he did something Sun-ho didn't expect. He lunged, not at his brother, but at the fire alarm. As the overhead sprinklers exploded into life, drenching the hallway in cold water, Min-ho grabbed Seo-yoon and her brother. Run! They burst through the emergency exit just as Sun-ho's men opened fire. Min-ho's black Lamborghini roared to life in the basement. They tore out of the garage, the tires screaming against the pavement. Behind them, 3 black SUVs appeared, weaving through the midnight traffic of Seoul's Olympic Expressway. Hold on! Min-ho shouted, swerving between a bus and a delivery truck. Seo-yoon looked at the speedometer. 160 kilometers per hour, 180 kilometers per hour. The city lights blurred into long streaks of neon blue and white. They're gaining! She cried, looking back. Min-ho slammed on the brakes, the car fishtailing wildly before coming to a dead stop in the middle of the bridge. What are you doing? They'll kill us! Seo-yoon screamed. Get in the driver's seat, Min-ho commanded, jumping out of the car. What? I can't drive this. My arm. You're an architect, Seo-yoon. Look at the road. It's just a blueprint. The curves, the friction, the weight. You know the math better than anyone in the world. Drive. Min-ho climbed onto the roof of the car as the SUVs screeched to a halt behind them. He pulled a heavy, modified industrial flare gun from the glove box, something he'd kept since the first attack. Seo-yoon gripped the steering wheel. Her right arm screamed in pain, the metal pins protesting the strain. But she looked at the rearview mirror, saw her brother's terrified face, and then looked at Min-ho on the roof. She slammed the car into gear and floored it. As the car surged forward, Min-ho fired the flare into the gas tank of the lead SUV. A massive fireball erupted, illuminating the Han River in a hellish orange glow. The explosion flipped the second SUV, sending it spinning into the guardrail. But Sun-ho's car, the third one, was untouched. It veered around the wreckage, accelerating toward them. The chase ended at the edge of the new Seoul Bridge, the very project that had caused so much blood. The construction was incomplete, a massive gap in the concrete hanging over the dark waters below. Seo-yoon slammed on the brakes at the very edge. Sun-ho's car pulled up inches from their bumper. Sun-ho stepped out, a gun in his hand. He looked at the gap in the bridge, then at his brother. Nowhere left to run, Min-ho. It's a dead end. It's not a dead end for her, Min-ho said, stepping in front of Seo-yoon. He turned to her and whispered, "The bridge. Is the temporary support structure holding?" Seo-yoon looked at the steel beams. She saw the vibration. She saw the poison pill she had placed in the design. Only for another 60 seconds. Then the resonance will tear it apart. Good, Min-ho said. He looked at his twin. You want the Empire, Sun-ho? It's yours, but you'll have to catch it. Min-ho grabbed the laptop containing the master encryption keys for the Shindong group, the only thing that could unlock the billions in offshore accounts, and tossed it over the edge of the bridge. No! Sun-ho screamed. diving toward the ledge. In that moment of distraction, Min-ho didn't attack. He grabbed Seo-yoon and his brother and pulled them toward the emergency service elevator. Min-ho! The bridge is collapsing! Seo-yoon yelled as the ground beneath them began to groan. I know! The steel cables snapped with the sound of a gunshot. The section of the bridge where Sun-ho stood began to tilt. Brother, help me! Sun-ho shrieked, his fingers slipping on the cold concrete. Min-ho stood at the edge of the elevator, his hand hovering over the down button. He looked at the man who shared his face, the man who had tried to kill him twice. For a second, the audience sees the conflict in Min-ho's eyes. The Ice King wants to let him fall. The Savior wants to reach out. Min-ho, we have to go! Seo-yoon urged. Min-ho looked at Seo-yoon. Then he looked at Sun-ho. 5 years ago, a girl saved a monster, Min-ho said, his voice echoing over the roar of the collapsing metal. But I'm not her. He pressed the button. The service elevator plummeted, the screech of metal on metal echoing the chaos above. Min-ho stood staring at the closed doors, his face a mask of stone as the bridge and his brother vanished into the dark Han River. Is it over? Seo-yoon whispered, clutching her brother Min-seok's hand. For now, Min-ho replied, but a monster like Sun-ho doesn't die from a fall. 72 hours later, the Shindong group was in a state of emergency. With the bridge collapse and the evil twin scandal hitting the news, the board of directors was calling for Min-ho's resignation. Min-ho walked into the conference room, but he wasn't alone. Seo-yoon followed him, no longer in a secretary's suit, but wearing a sharp, structured dress in Shindong blue. The bridge didn't fall because of a design flaw, Seo-yoon announced, throwing a tablet onto the central table. It fell because of a remote detonated structural breach. Here is the signal frequency, traced back to the personal device of director Han Yura. The board went silent. Yura, who had been sitting smugly at the end of the table, turned pale. That's a fabrication, Yura shrieked. Is it? Min-ho stepped forward, his presence suffocating the room. Because the police just found the detonator in your vanity at the hotel, along with the jewelry you stole from me 5 years ago. And as the police entered to escort Yura out, she leaned towards Seo-yoon, whispering with a jagged smile, You think you won? Sun-ho is already at the Shindong estate. The grandmother. She chose the other grandson. Min-ho and Seo-yoon raced to the family estate. They expected a siege. They found a party. The gardens were lit with red lanterns. Madam Park sat at the head of a long table, and sitting beside her, perfectly dry and wearing a fresh suit, was Sun-ho. He looked like a ghost come back to claim the living. Ah, the prodigal son returns, Madam Park said, her voice sounding strangely hollow. And he brought the girl. Grandmother, move away from him, Min-ho warned, his hand reaching for the concealed weapon in his jacket. He tried to kill us. Did he? Madam Park tilted her head. Or did he simply do what I asked? I needed to see which twin was the predator and which was the prey. Shindong cannot survive under a savior. It needs a king. Seo-yoon stepped forward, her eyes scanning the table. Her architect's brain noticed the slight tilt of the wine glasses, the way the staff stood too stiffly. The soup, Seo-yoon said suddenly, her voice sharp. Don't drink it. Min-ho looked at the black chicken soup, the same recipe the grandmother always made. Grandmother, what did you put in this? Min-ho asked, his heart sinking. Justice, Sun-ho laughed, leaning forward. You see, Min-ho, 5 years ago, it wasn't just a car crash. The grandmother ordered the hit. She wanted to weed out the weak twin. But this girl, ruined the experiment. You were supposed to die so I could take over cleanly. Min-ho looked at his grandmother, the woman he had spent his life trying to protect. The betrayal was deeper than any physical wound. "So," Min-ho said, his voice trembling with a cold rage, "if I'm the prey, then I suppose I should act like it." He picked up the spoon. "Min-ho, no!" Seo-yoon grabbed his arm. "Let go, Seo-yoon," Min-ho said, looking her in the eyes. "If this is what the Shindong blood demands, I'll give it to them." He swallowed a spoonful of the soup. Sun-ho grinned, watching him like a vulture. Madam Park watched with a terrifying clinical interest. Seconds passed. Min-ho began to cough. He collapsed onto the table, his face turning a sickly gray. "Finally," Sun-ho exhaled, standing up. "The empire is mine. Grandmother, I'll take the seal now." Sun-ho reached for the jade seal on the table, but as his fingers touched the stone, he let out a blood-curdling scream. He pulled his hand back, his skin blistering instantly. Min-ho sat up, perfectly fine. He wiped his mouth. "You always were the greedy one, Sun-ho. You didn't notice the soup was just colored water, but the jade seal, that was coated in the chemical accelerant you used to burn our parents' house 15 years ago." The doors to the banquet hall burst open. It wasn't the police. It was the entire Shindong staff, the lowly workers, the janitors, and the secretaries Seo-yoon had befriended. "You think power comes from a bloodline?" Seo-yoon said, standing beside Min-ho. "Power comes from the people who build the walls you live in. And today, they've decided to stop holding them up." As Sun-ho was dragged away, screaming in agony from the chemical burns, Madam Park looked at Min-ho with a strange, twisted pride. "You used the girl's tactics," she whispered. "You've finally become a monster." "No," Min-ho said, taking Seo-yoon's hand, the one with the scar. "I've finally become a man." But as they walked out into the moonlight, Seo-yoon's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It contained a photo of the rainy night 5 years ago. The photo showed the car crash, but it showed a third figure in the shadows, holding a camera. The caption read, "The savior wasn't the only one watching. Do you want to know who really cut the brakes? It wasn't the grandmother." Seo-yoon froze. She looked at Min-ho's smiling face, then back at the photo. The figure in the shadows was wearing a very familiar piece of jewelry, a medical ID bracelet from her brother's hospital. "Min-seok? My brother? It's impossible. He was only a child, unless he's been lying to me for 5 years." The buzzing of the phone in Seo-yoon's hand felt like a live wire. She stared at the pixelated image of the crash site. There, in the tall grass near the flaming wreckage of Min-ho's car, was a small figure. The face was obscured, but the glint on the wrist was unmistakable. The blue medical ID bracelet she had bought for Min-seok with her first paycheck. He was 12. He was supposed to be at home. If he was there, if he watched me pull Min-ho out, why did he never say a word? And why was he holding a camera instead of a phone to call for help? "Seo-yoon? What is it?" Min-ho asked, stepping closer. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, softened only by the way he looked at her, with a terrifying absolute devotion. "Nothing," she lied, her thumb hovering over the delete button. "Just a message from the hospital. Min-seok is sleeping." She couldn't tell him. Not yet. If Min-ho found out her brother was involved in his attempted murder, he wouldn't just stop the medical payments. He would erase Min-seok from existence. The wedding of the century was scheduled for the following morning. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was a merger. Min-ho had organized it to consolidate his power and publicly humiliate the remains of the old guard who had supported his brother. The venue, a glass-walled cathedral overlooking the Han River, built by Shindong Construction. Seo-yoon sat in the bridal suite. The dress was a masterpiece of white silk, but to her, it felt like a shroud. She looked at the mirror. Behind her, the door opened. It wasn't a stylist. It was Min-seok. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He was walking, slowly, but steadily. "You're walking," Seo-yoon whispered, her voice cracking. "I've been walking for months, Nuna," Min-seok said, his voice devoid of the childlike innocence he usually used. He sat on the vanity, swinging his legs. "But if I got better too fast, you would have stopped working for the Ice King, and I needed you close to him." Seo-yoon turned, her heart freezing. "The photo, you sent it." "I did. I wanted you to see the truth before you tied yourself to him forever." Min-seok pulled a small remote from his pocket. "Min-ho didn't just survive that crash, Nuna. He was the target because he found out our father was the one who funded the research that killed his parents. Our family wasn't poor because of bad luck. We were poor because Min-ho's father stole our father's patents and left us to rot in the slums." "That's a lie," Seo-yoon gasped. "Is it? Ask him about the Project Aegis files, the ones hidden in the foundation of this very building." Min-seok stood up, his eyes cold. "In 10 minutes, the ceremony starts. In 15 minutes, I'm going to release the data that will bankrupt Shindong and put Min-ho in a cage for life, unless you leave him at the altar, right now." The music began, a heavy orchestral version of a traditional wedding march. The pews were packed with the elite of South Korea, all holding their breath. Min-ho stood at the altar. He looked perfect, but as Seo-yoon appeared at the end of the aisle, his eyes narrowed. He saw the way she held her bouquet, too tight. He saw the tremor in her step. Seo-yoon walked toward him. Every step felt like she was walking toward a cliff. She reached the altar. The priest began to speak. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined..." The doors at the back of the cathedral slammed open. It wasn't the police. It was the second savior, or so the crowd thought. It was a video projection, appearing on the massive white walls of the cathedral. It was the footage from 5 years ago. But it wasn't just the crash. The video continued. It showed Seo-yoon dragging Min-ho to safety. Then, it showed a figure approaching the unconscious Min-ho. It was Min-seok. He didn't help. He reached into Min-ho's pocket, took a flash drive, and whispered into Min-ho's ear. "Don't worry, I'll let her save you. It'll make the betrayal hurt more later." The congregation gasped. The innocent brother was the architect of the long-game revenge. Min-ho didn't look at the screen. He kept his eyes on Seo-yoon. "I knew," Min-ho whispered over the roar of the crowd's whispers. Seo-yoon blinked. "What?" "I knew your brother took the drive. I knew he was the one who cut the brakes. He was a child, but he was a child fueled by hate." Min-ho took her hand, the metal pins in her arm, pressing against his palm. "I didn't hire you because you saved me, Seo-yoon. I hired you because I wanted to see if someone who came from so much hate could still love a monster like me." "Min-ho, the police are outside," Seo-yoon said, tears finally falling. "The files he's releasing, they'll destroy you." "Let them," Min-ho said. He turned to the crowd, then back to the priest. "Skip to the vows." "But Chairman?" "I said skip to the vows!" Min-ho grabbed the ring. "I, Kang Min-ho, take you, Lee Seo-yoon, not as a savior and not as a secretary, but as my partner in whatever hell comes next. If we go to prison, we go together. If we lose the money, we lose it together." At the back of the room, Min-seok stood with his finger over the enter key on his laptop. He looked at his sister. He saw her smile, a real, genuine smile, for the first time since their parents died. His hand shook. The sirens were wailing outside. The glass walls of the cathedral reflected the red and blue lights. Seo-yoon looked at Min-ho. She took the ring. "I do," she said. The enter key was never pressed. Min-seok sat in the back of the cathedral, his hands covering his face. He hadn't deleted the files, but he hadn't sent them either. He had realized that destroying Min-ho wouldn't fix his own broken legs or bring their father back. It would only break the only person who had ever truly loved him. But the choice was taken out of their hands. The doors burst open, not for the wedding, but for the prosecution. Behind them stood the old guard board members led by the grandmother. She had leaked the files herself. If she couldn't have a king she could control, she would burn the kingdom down to claim the insurance. Chairman Kang Min-ho, the lead investigator announced, his voice echoing off the glass walls. You are under arrest for the embezzlement and patent theft of Project Aegis. The congregation erupted into chaos. Paparazzi scrambled over pews. Min-ho didn't flinch. He looked at Seo-yoon, who was still holding his hand. Go, Min-ho whispered, sliding a small encrypted key into her palm. This is the real design for the new Seoul Bridge, not the one with the poison pill, the perfect one. Take it. Rebuild your name. I'm not leaving you, she said, her voice steady. You have to. If you stay, you're an accomplice. If you leave, you're the successor. Shindong is falling, Seo-yoon. Let it burn. Build something better on the empty lot. He leaned in and kissed her, a hard, desperate kiss that tasted of salt and rain, before the officers pulled him away. 1 year later, in the countryside of Gangwon-do, the air was clean, smelling of pine needles and sea salt. Gone were the skyscrapers of Seoul and the suffocating scent of sandalwood. A small, modest building of wood and glass sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sign out front read, "The Savior's Studio." Seo-yoon sat at a drafting table, her right arm moving fluidly. The pins were still there, but the pain had faded into a dull hum of habit. She was no longer a ghost. She was the most sought-after architect in Korea, known for building homes that breathe. The door opened. Min-seok walked in. No crutches, no wheelchair. He was carrying a tray of coffee. He had spent the year in a youth rehabilitation center and intensive therapy. The hate in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, lingering guilt. The mail is here, Nuna, he said, setting a letter on her desk. It was from the Seoul Central Penitentiary. Release date, February 12th. Time, 9 a.m. The heavy iron gates of the prison groaned open at 9 a.m. Min-ho stepped out. He wasn't wearing a bespoke suit anymore. He wore a simple black hoodie and jeans. He looked thinner, his hair a bit longer, but his eyes were still sharp, the eyes of a man who had finally slept. He expected to see a black sedan. He expected to see lawyers. Instead, he saw a delivery scooter. Seo-yoon was leaning against it, wearing a rain jacket, holding 2 helmets. You're late, Chairman, she said, a playful spark in her eyes. Protocol says the CEO shouldn't keep his driver waiting. Min-ho walked toward her, the distance between them closing for the final time. I don't have a company anymore, Seo-yoon. I don't have a name. I have nothing. You have a contract, she said, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, the original contract from the hotel. She pointed to a clause she had added in her own handwriting. Clause 12. In the event of a total collapse, the party of the first part, the boss, must work for the party of the second part, the secretary, until the debt of a saved life is paid in full. Duration. Forever. Min-ho laughed, a real warm sound that bounced off the gray prison walls. He took the helmet. What's my first task, boss? We're going to the bridge, she said. They stood at the center of the completed bridge. It was a marvel of engineering, slender, white, and seemingly floating over the water. It wasn't built by Shindong. It was built by a collective of small firms, led by Seo-yoon. The grandmother tried to sue for the land, Seo-yoon said, looking at the sunset. But it turns out, when you try to kill your grandsons, the board of directors tends to vote you out. She's currently living in a studio apartment in Incheon. She says the soup there is terrible. Min-ho leaned against the railing, his hand covering hers on the cold steel. And Sun-ho disappeared. Some say he went to the Philippines. Some say he's still under the bridge. But he won't come back. He knows we're watching the shadows now. Min-ho looked at the bridge, then at her scarred arm, then at her face. He realized that the hidden identity wasn't the secret of who saved whom. The true identity was the people they became because of each other. "I never asked," Min-ho said. "That night 5 years ago, why did you stop? You didn't know me. I was just a man in a burning car." Seo-yoon looked at the horizon, where the sky met the sea. "I didn't see a man in a car," she whispered. "I saw a bridge that hadn't been built yet, and I couldn't let it fall." She turned to him, her face radiant in the dying light. "Now, are you going to kiss your boss, or do I have to fire you?" Min-ho didn't wait for a second order. He pulled her in, and as the sun dipped below the Han River, the invisible secretary and the Ice King vanished, leaving only two people who had finally found their way home.